Hello everyone, I am Jason Janji Doke from Basic Matre A. For today's videos, I will explain the basic concepts on special and inclusive education. Education 103 Foundations of Special and Inclusive Education. Let's begin. Our learning objectives at the end of this discussion, the learners expected to understand the basic concepts on special and inclusive education, analyze the basic concepts on special and inclusive education, and demonstrate understanding of the basic concepts on special and inclusive education. To proceed to our introduction, I have questions. Number one is special education the same as inclusive education? Number two, what are the similarities and differences between the two terms? Our introduction, the goal of inclusive special education development is to establish a vision and principle for policies, procedures, and teaching practices that will help all children with special educational needs and disabilities receive an effective education. While many contrasts between special and inclusive education have been made and are now hotly discussed, the two ideas are still strongly present in policy and practice in many nations with their special education. It examines how similar or dissimilar the terms special and inclusive education are now. When lawmakers create legislation and policies, teachers in the classrooms implement them, and parents whose children are in the heart of the issue. Combining inclusion and special education typically generates diverse opinions from many stakeholders. Since inclusion and special education are such vast topics, we'll look at how they are two entities that are closely intertwined through their historical views. The two share their perspectives on education for youngsters with unique needs and impairments. Our main points, what is special education? When we say special education, it is the practice of educating students with special needs in a way that addresses their individual difference. This process involves the individually planned and systematically monitored arrangements of teachings, procedures, adapted equipment and materials, and accessible settings. The development and maximization of learning competencies, as well the inculcation of values to make the learners with special needs as useful and effective members of the society. The teacher also collaborates with the general education teacher to provide service for students. Special education, means provides an equal access to the educational opportunities for students with disabilities, teach the students how to appreciate with a diversity and make a positive environment, and realization that every student with disabilities need to be in the least restrictive environment. Let's proceed to the next. What is inclusive education? Inclusive education refers to an education system that accommodates all children regardless of their physical, intellectual, social, emotional, linguistics, or other conditions. It is about restructuring the cultures, policies, and practices in schools so that they respond to the diversity of students in their locality. Accepting and valuing human diversity and providing the necessary support so that all children and their families can participate successfully in the programs of their choice. This provides educational services for all students, including those with special needs. When we say inclusive education, it is the process of addressing and reacting to all learners' diverse needs through boosting involvement in learning cultures and communities, then minimizing exclusion within from minimizing exclusion from within education. So let's so it is important to avoid also discriminatory behavior and language towards learner with disabilities. So person with an intellectual, so it is better to say that it is right to say that person with an intellectual disability or person with mental health impairments rather than using mentally ill, mentally patient, or insane, or avoid using the words abnormal or special because this can deem offensive way. This practice shapes the focus of the individual rather than their condition. So we have three difference: inclusion, mainstreaming, integration. So when we say inclusion, welcoming diversity by providing varied responses to the diverse needs in formal or informal settings. So when we say mainstreaming is the practice of the students with learning challenges and regular classes in the less restrictive environment. So integration, according to Franklin 1996, refers to the creation of the spaces such as regular classrooms or all-out service for diverse learners. So when we observe these pictures, so the picture as above show equality, equity, liberation. So it is not all times we use these terms equality. So it means it is equity for sure, for the right to use the equity. So the second one is the individual and society, the medical model and social model. So when we say, so if we say medical model, the person is the problem. Then in the social model, the barriers created by the society are the problem. The individual needs to change. In the medical model, PWDs become the victim or client that their responsibilities are disempowered. Assessment, monitoring, and evaluation are imposed by therapy. Segregation and alternative service are given. Society remains unchanged. While in the social model, it is the barriers need to be removed. PWDs barriers need to be PWDs have independence, control, and choice. Resources are made available to regular services. Training, parents, and professionals are provided. Society evolves. So, in the next part, we have now in our conclusion. So, take note that it's right to say a person with an intellectual disability or person with mental health impairments. It is a correct one, other than you say an special person or abnormal person. It's not correct. It is an offensive way to that person. So in our conclusion, to begin, an inclusive special education theory has been proposed, which blends special education and inclusive education philosophies, policies, and practices in order to build inclusive special education. Aspects of both methodologies are integrated into this concept. In addition, this presentation of an inclusive special education theory aims to contribute the development of a new vision that combines key aspects of inclusive and special education to ensure that all children with special educational needs and disabilities, or we call SEN, receive the best possible education, and as a result are best prepared to live successful and fulfilled lives after they leave school. Furthermore, this has been much broader focus than inclusive education for children with SEN, despite the fact that proponents of full inclusion usually use The terms interchangeably. Many supporters of inclusive education also refer to it as a process that is involved redesigning entire schools to become inclusive schools. The ultimate goal of full inclusion, on the other hand, is implied in this process. So this is intended to finish a discussion that will lead more development of the philosophy of inclusive special education. The most fundamental problem with the definition of inclusion is the completion of social inclusion with inclusive education for children with SED. So, in conclusion, due to special education, the special need, failed marginalization, and inclusion, this result in the growth of inferiority complexes among them and their parent or guardian that leads us the vision of inclusive education. So, it emphasizes quality of education and considers the improvement of child. So, if the child did not learn, the system needs to be improved. Lastly, the effectiveness and including all in the learning process. That's all, and thank you. And so on. This is my reference.